That was very embarrassing, you know, because I didn't understand a single word I said.
I remember once before we played your voice, and the whole rest of the evening you said, I'm still trying to figure out whose voice that was.
Yeah, well, one of the problems I think I mentioned to you before about being interviewed by you shortly after a book comes out is that I don't usually know what the book is about yet, you know, in some serious way, kind of bird's eye view or God's eye view. So usually when you got talking to me, I'm still trying to figure out, you know, what exactly was being put together in a way. So it has often been difficult, and I think I suggested we wait 6 months or 10 years before. And I was listening to an interview with you and Mavis Gallant where she was wonderful when she was talking about something she'd written 40 years ago. You know, she was very clear, and she could remember it, which would be my problem. But, you know, she really remembered every detail, every sentence.
So you think we should wait 20 more years?
A little bit longer, yeah. Okay, I'm going to introduce Eleanor now. Eleanor Wachtel was born and raised in Montreal. She started her career in journalism in Vancouver, and just over 20 years ago moved to Toronto to work full-time for CBC Radio, for shows such as State of the Arts, The Arts Report, and The Arts Tonight. In fact, she was the host of The Arts Tonight for 12 years alongside Writers and Company, and now she also hosts Wachtel on the Arts for Ideas. She has published 4 books of interviews, including Original Minds and Random Illuminations, Conversations with Carol Shields. Eleanor has received many honors for her contributions to Canadian cultural life, including the Jack Award for the promotion of Canadian books, 8 honorary doctorates, and the Order of Canada.
As is always the case, the greater the person, the less introduction they need. Michael Ondaatje was born in Sri Lanka and came to Canada in 1962. He's written 5 novels, a memoir, an interview book on film, and 11 books of poetry. He's won virtually every literary award, including the Giller, the Governor General's more than once, the Booker Prize, the Irish Times International Fiction Prize, and the Prix Medici. He also has the Order of Canada, but he keeps turning down honorary degrees.
So are you nervous?
Yes.
Good. You become in these last years a very essential tradition in radio, not just for writers, but also for readers in Canada, and also in the States through Sirius satellite radio. Through you, we've discovered so much about writers from all over the world, and so first of all, many congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
How many writers do you think you've interviewed?
It's hard to count. When I was asked to estimate, I said about 1,000, but I don't know if that's precise or not.
There's no precision involved tonight, so don't worry.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
And you've been grilling writers for over 20 years, so it's a great pleasure to turn the tables on you. And so let's go back to the beginning the way you usually do. What's your earliest memory?
I remember when I asked you that, you said you couldn't remember anything before you were 11. But that didn't seem fair. Mm. Well, the earliest memory is actually, it's in, I grew up in Montreal, and my first couple of years were in the area of Montreal, I'll just move this, the area of Montreal that Mordecai Richler describes in St. Urban Street. It wasn't actually St. Urban Street, but it was in that neighborhood. And I remember crawling down a very long hallway. And subsequently, I remember, I never really knew how to describe that environment, but when I interviewed Maureen Forrester, who also grew up in Montreal, she called it a railway apartment. Mm. And that's what I realized it was. There was this long hallway, and there were rooms off the railway, yeah. You know, like compartments. And I just remember it seeming very far away and crawling down there. But I have an adjacent memory, which is pulling out pots and pans from the bottom cupboard of the kitchen, and those are and playing with them, you know, like certain percussion, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. But this all had to be before I was 2.5, because then we moved to a different neighborhood. So.
And what about the German measles?
The German measles, that was later.
Yeah, I know. We're progressing slowly through your life.
Well, the German measles is actually funny because it has a lot to do with memory. And that's a subject that comes up frequently with a lot of writers. But I remembered that my sister had the German measles, and then she gave it to me, so I had a milder case, and could spend a lot of time just reading and having my friends come. And I used this, I mentioned this in an introduction to Original Minds, because I was thinking about that period when I started reading about people's lives and biography and some of these original thinkers. And when I checked with my sister, it turned out it was the other way around. And that I had the really bad measles, and she had a great time with her friends who came in. And I remember once interviewing Frank McCourt, and he also said he had sort of appropriated somebody else's memory. He'd heard this vivid story about a runaway horse, and he wrote it as if it was his own story, but it wasn't.
So was there anything between that first memory of the Parson parents and the German measles that I
that you should know about?
That we should know about, or a crucial influence?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Well, what happened was, I think the crucial influence there, again, this is in some ways related to my sister and the measles, is that I think in a sense the biggest influence in my sort of formative shaping of my life, I think, were my two older siblings, because they were the readers in the family, and so I was introduced to the idea, this is what you did, you read on Saturday mornings, you'd lie in bed and read, and you wouldn't get up and do errands and things. And they won scholarships through high school, so I knew that's what I would have to do, and that they took honors at McGill, and so I knew that's what I would do. So it was a very shaping, it was very influential that way. And, but in terms of actual books, there weren't a lot of books in the house. But I don't want to.
You said there weren't too many books in the house.
No, well, my parents weren't big readers. I think my mother did, as far as I know, she read one book, which was Gone with the Wind, because she loved Clark Gable. And so books, there weren't a lot of books. There was Reader's Digest. There was Reader's Digest condensed books. There was a big sort of omnibus fairy tale book that my sister and I shared that had a big yellow cover, and it had Hans Brinker, The Silver Skates, and Heidi, and Grimm's Fairy Tales, and Black Beauty. And we read it a lot, and then the cover came off, and then we read it some more. It was a big thing. But books came from the library. So there's a certain sense in which it's extremely appropriate to be doing this, having this conversation in a library, because libraries were the source of all reading. There were school libraries, but those were just little. But there was a large, and Montreal did not have a very good public library system. So initially, my mother would take my sister and me on a streetcar and then a bus to go to the library. And then when there was a local branch of the library that opened up around the corner from where I was living, that's where we would go. And in fact, when I put together a first book of interviews, I dedicated it to the Snowden branch of the NDG Boys and Girls Public Library, because then I could go there myself and take out books. And at that point, I would be reading things like, Sue Barton, Student Nurse. And so I had a very erratic kind of, I remember interviewing people whose childhood reading was sort of scrappy. There were a lot of gaps, and I'm hoping that you won't know about them, because there were a lot of gaps in terms of classic children's reading. There were a lot of books I didn't read because I just went to the shelves and just pulled stuff out.
I remember your interview with Jane Goodall, where she was talking about the two books that influenced her when she was young. Do you remember what they were?
One was Dr. Dolittle, because I love that one also.
Yeah. And the other was Tarzan.
Well, that's because Jane Goodall thought that she already had ambitions to go to Africa, and she loved Tarzan, and her name was Jane, and she thought she would have made a better Jane.
So did you ever interview anyone as a child?